Senator Plett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for having given me the opportunity to review the issues that were raised last Tuesday and to do some research and prepare my remarks. I want to first put the events that are at the heart of Senator St. Germain's question of privilege in context. Secondly, I would like to point out some elements that I think should guide you in your decision. And finally, I would like to close with some personal considerations on this. So I will apologize ahead of time, Madam Speaker, that I may be a little longer than what you suggested, and I hope you will indulge me. I will get back later to the actual facts that happened on November 9th and have been raised on Tuesday, but I want to start by giving you, Madam Speaker, and colleagues the reasons why opposition senators were frustrated and many would say angry when the debate on C-234 was adjourned. First, we were of the impression, I was of the impression, that an agreement between groups had been reached to complete the debate on that Thursday. This, as far as we were concerned, had been agreed upon 10 days earlier. It is, of course, the purview of all leaders or groups to change their minds. And one could have expected that, but one would have maybe expected that the other leaders, if they had changed their minds, would have given me notice that debate on C-234 would not conclude that evening. They did not. The different groups and their leaders have every right to enter or not into deals to move legislation on or on the timing for the debate. They have every right to change their mind. I believe it is, however, common courtesy to advise the other groups when there is a change after a deal was made, and that usually is the case. It was not on November 9th. Secondly, we were somewhat surprised when Senator Monsian moved an amendment. And I remind you, Speaker, in our minds, the debate on the bill was to close that day. So to our surprise, a senator moves an amendment. Senator Monsian, like any other senator, has the absolute perfect right to move an amendment on any bill, regardless of what the substance of that amendment is, and we certainly appreciate and respect that. Senators will know that most of the time, notice of an amendment is given at scroll. On November 9th, no such notice was given to the other groups, or at least certainly not to us. As I said, a senator has every right to move an amendment. It is, however, common courtesy to advise other groups. There was no such common courtesy. Finally, Senator Clement moved the adjournment of the debate before a single senator had a chance to speak on the amendment. As it was pointed out on Tuesday, the adjournment is usually moved after senators who want to enter on debate on that day can do so. Now, we never said we did not want senators who were not in the chamber on that day, as Senator Wu suggested the other day. He hadn't been able to be here to enter debate at a later date. What was unusual was that the adjournment was moved before the list of people who were in the chamber and who indeed were standing wanted to, before that was exhausted, or in this case actually even started. Imagine, colleagues, in her haste to adjourn the debate to allow senators who were not in the chamber to enter debate at a later date, Senator Clement may have prevented from entering debate a senator who was present on November the 9th, who wanted to enter the debate, but who could not be here at a later date. That person would have had the rights of him or her entering the debate. A senator has every right to adjourn the debate on a motion or an amendment. Again, it is common courtesy to let senators who are in the chamber who want to intervene to do so before moving the adjournment. So it is in this context that the adjournment was moved, a standing vote was called, and I then went over to Senator St. Germain who was sitting next to Senator Clement. And I will deal with that later on in my remarks as to the events that happened there. But before I get to the specific facts that were brought up and discuss if privilege of a senator was indeed breached, let me point out what the definition of privilege is. The classic definition of parliamentary privilege is found in Erskine May's treatise on the law, privileges, proceedings, and usage of Parliament. Parliamentary privilege is the sum of certain rights enjoyed by each House collectively and by members of each House individually, without which they could not discharge their functions and which exceed those possessed by other bodies or individuals. The Senate procedure and practice on page 224 says the following: the purpose of privilege is to enable Parliament, and by extension its members, to fulfill their functions without undue interference or obstruction. Privilege belongs properly to the Assembly or House as a collective. Individual members can only claim privilege if any denial of their rights or threat made to them would impede the functioning of the House. On pages 225 and 226, the individual privileges that senators enjoy include the following: freedom of speech in Parliament and its committees, freedom from arrest in civil cases, exemption from jury duty and from appearance as a witness in a court case, and freedom from obstruction and intimidation. To Erskine May, the privileges of Parliament are rights absolutely necessary for the due execution of its powers. Privilege is not just something nice to have. It is the strict minimum for the parliamentarians to do their jobs. From the question of privilege raised on Tuesday, only one of those privileges has allegedly been breached: freedom of obstruction by intimidation. The fifth report of the Standing Committee on Privileges, Standing Rules and Orders on May 6, 1993, and quoted in the journals of the Senate on pages 2052 and 2053, says the following: an adverse reflection upon a senator or the Senate can constitute a breach of privilege, but only if it impedes the senator or the Senate from performing parliamentary functions. So for a senator's privilege to be breached, there must be proof of obstruction and intimidation, and there must also be proof that such obstruction and intimidation impeded the senator from performing their parliamentary functions. Senator St. Germain said on Tuesday that the events in question affected numerous senators and had a negative impact on the Senate as an institution. This may be true, but one or more senators being affected or a negative impact on the Senate do not constitute a breach of privilege. Privilege is very narrowly defined. This is normal, as parliamentary privilege is an immunity from the ordinary law, as Speaker Fury said on March 1st, 2018, or powers which exceed those possessed by other bodies or individuals, as May said in the definition I quoted before. With all due respect, privilege does not protect the Senate from a negative impact or senators from being affected. Privilege does not insulate senators and the Senate from anything negative that can be said to them or about them. It protects them from being impeded from performing their parliamentary functions. What are the facts that happened on November 9th that were raised by Senator St. Germain? She said, "I violently threw my earpiece. I stood in front of Senator St. Germain and Senator Clement. I yelled and berated them. I pointed fingers at Senator Monsignor. Senator MacDonald shouted the word fascist. Threats were made that business in committees chaired by ISG senators would be blocked. Senator St. Germain also accused Senator Batters and Senator Housakis of having retweeted a post made by Andrew Scheer inviting Canadians to phone the offices of two senators. She also took offense to the tweets from Senator Wells accusing the ISG leadership of working in concert with the Speaker of the Senate. Senator St. Germain never explained how any of these constitute an obstruction on the parliamentary functions or of any of the senators. She never alleged that her or any senator's ability to debate and vote on Bill C-234 or any other Senate matter was impeded. In fact, Senators St. Germain, Senator Clement, and Senator Monsignor all voted on the adjournment of the debate on C-234 on November 9th. So was the parliamentary privilege of one or more senators breached on November 9th or through the tweets and retweets? You will note, Madam Speaker, that none of the senators who rose to speak on Tuesday quoted a previous speaker's decision or an author to support their case that there was a breach of privilege. There is a reason for this, Madam Speaker. There is none. There is, however, several precedents where the issue of breach of privilege was studied and decided upon, and that I think might guide you through your decision, Madam Speaker. Let's see what the precedents tell us. Number one, privilege does not cover everything. On March 1st, 2018, Speaker Fury ruled on a question of privilege raised by Senator McFedrin and stated that the purpose of privilege is to enable Parliament and its members to fulfill their legislative and deliberative functions without undue interference. Not all activities undertaken by senators in the course of their work, no matter how valuable or how commendable, are always covered by privilege. A senator does not enjoy parliamentary privilege for everything. There must be undue interference in their legislative and deliberative functions for their privilege to be breached. Number two, personal, sharp, and taxing language in the chamber is not an issue of privilege. On April 21st, 2009, Speaker Kinsella had to rule on a question of privilege raised by Senator Harb regarding some language used during debate, and here is his quote. On the second criteria, that the matter must directly concern privilege, Senator Harb felt that the remarks affected him personally, seeing them as an attempt to silence him. In point of fact, however, nothing actually prevented the senator from continuing to speak in debate. If there was any problem with the remarks, it was more as to whether they were personal, sharp, or taxing. To use the language of Rule 51, as such, the issue may have been one of order, but was certainly not one of privilege. A senator being attacked, even if the language used is personal, sharp, or taxing, does not constitute a breach of privilege of a senator, especially if the senator was not prevented from participating in debate. In fact, freedom of speech is the right protected by privilege, not freedom from speech. In a ruling made on October 5th, 2010, the Speaker said, "The basic principle in this case is freedom of speech, as noted in the second edition of the House of Commons Procedure and Practice at pages 89 and 90. This is by far the most important right accorded to members of the House. a fundamental right without which they would be hampered in their performance of their duties. It permits them to speak in the House without inhibition, to refer to any matter or express any opinion as they see fit, to say what they feel needs to be said in the furtherance of the national interest and the aspirations of their residents. According to page 96 of the 23rd edition of Erskine May, this means that, subject to the rules of order in debate, a member may state whatever he thinks fit in debate, however offensive it may be to the feelings or injurious to the character of individuals, and he is protected by his privilege from any action for libel as well as from any other question or molestation. Number 3, attacks in the media and on social media is not an issue of privilege. While some senators may feel they are unfairly attacked in the media or on social media platforms, this does not constitute a breach of privilege. Let me again quote Speaker Kinsella from his ruling on December 14, 2009. As the English philosopher John Stuart Mill pointed out in On Liberty more than 150 years ago, it is not our role as parliamentarians to suppress the liberty of the citizen, particularly in the exercise of free speech. We now understand that public engagement in national affairs is to be fostered and nurtured. It is part of the vibrant democracy we enjoy in Canada. Good debate inside Parliament, and therefore good legislation and policy, is helped by informed criticism from keen observers and the general public, with useful criticism. However, we must all too often be willing to accept ill-informed, indeed harsh and offensive comments. We need not like it at all, but no one occupying a position in Parliament at the heart of public life can claim exemption from being exposed to sometimes unmerited or ignorant criticism. That is not my words, that is a quote. For privilege to be breached, the threats must be serious. Again from Speaker Kinsella's ruling. It may also be of interest to note here that when Beauchesne refers to threats attempting to influence members, it appears to envision more than merely uninformed or disagreeable commentary. Citation 99 explains that normal practice is now to turn investigation over to the ordinary forces of the law. This suggests an entirely different type of matter from mere words or a press release. It implies direct threat and a menace, even physical intimidation. Number 4, a senator or the Senate must not be able to perform their duties. As I said before, to invoke privilege, a parliamentarian must prove not only that they received what could be perceived as a threat, but they must also prove that they were obstructed in the performance of their duties, not that they were troubled or affected by these perceived threats. Speaker Fury ruled on November 1st, 2017 on a question of privilege that I raised regarding a letter from Senator Lankin. Here is what he said. Parliamentary privilege relates to the privileges, immunities, and powers enjoyed by the Senate and each of its members, without which they could not discharge their legislative and deliberative functions. In addition, as noted on page 228 of the Senate Procedures and Practice, if senators are to carry out their parliamentary duties properly, it is only logical that they are protected from interference in the performance of their duties. For example, any attempt to prevent senators from entering Parliament or to intimidate them in carrying out their duties would constitute a breach of privilege. And then, I understand that some senators might be troubled by Senator Lankin's letter. There is nothing that would impede senators from continuing their work on Bill C-210. The bill is still on the orders of the day and is called each day for debate, according to our usual practices. Senators remain free to deal with the bill as they see fit. The independence of the Senate and senators is not affected by this letter. I submit to you, Madam Speaker, that several other decisions from your predecessors are saying the same thing. Speaker Mulgat ruled on November 7th, 1995, that something can be inflammatory, can be disagreeable, can be offensive, but it may not be a question of privilege unless the comment actually impinges upon the ability of members of Parliament to do their job properly. An adverse reflection upon a senator or the Senate can constitute breach of privilege, but only if it impedes the senator or the Senate from performing parliamentary functions. As such, it has a very narrow application and is to be distinguished from actions for defamation, which are available to all citizens and are pursued through the civil courts. It is extremely difficult to bring oneself within protection offered by this aspect of parliamentary privilege. There must be a link or nexus between the alleged defamation and the parliamentary work of a senator. Speaker Hayes, on May 8, 2003, said, "While the language used in a formal message from the other place may seem harsh or stern, it does not constitute a breach of privilege." Again, Speaker Kinsella, on February 12, 2008, ruled that absent some form of a threat, a message from one House to another cannot be treated as a point of order or breach of privilege. Speaker Kinsella also said on December 14, 2009, there cannot be a breach of privilege if the senator raising the issue and the Senate as a whole was able to perform their duties. Senator Cools can speak freely on the bill, subject to our rules and practices. Other senators can do the same. Neither her right to speak nor that of any other honourable senator has been infringed. Eventually, at a time determined by the Senate, it will make a decision on second reading of Bill C-268. No matter what happened on November 9th or what was said on social media, there was no proof given that a senator was not able to speak or vote freely on that day or since. There is no proof that any of this affected the Senate's right to deal with Bill C-234. In fact, everything that happened that evening since point to the contrary. So let me answer the question of whether there is a prima facie evidence of a breach of privilege. First, I would like to reiterate the point I made on Tuesday about the fact the notice given by Senator St. Germain was insufficiently detailed, and that means her question of privilege cannot be considered. As to the facts that Senator St. Germain laid out Tuesday, I do not question them. I may have experienced some of them differently, but they are what they are. But the decision you will have to make, Madam Speaker, is the following. Was there on that evening or since a breach of privilege? The answer, in my opinion, is clearly no. Unless we want to reinvent the notion of parliamentary privilege, there was no breach. What happened in this chamber on November 9th and what some senators did on social media, offensive as they may be, is not covered by privilege. As I said, parliamentary privilege is very narrow. It does not protect senators from being troubled by their behavior of a colleague. It does not protect senators from sharp language. It does not shield senators from attacks in the media or on social media, however uncomfortable that may make them. It does not mean that Canadians cannot come in front of the Senate building to voice their opinion. It does not make the Senate, as we debate and vote on legislation that affects the daily lives of all Canadians, into an comfortable ivory tower insulated from the noise and the fury of the political arena. And as said by your predecessors, Madam Speaker, in the rulings I mentioned, receiving political pressure is an integral part of the job of senators. The issue is, are they threats? And do they obstruct the work of senators? This week, the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs of the House of Commons voted a resolution asking the Senate to adopt without amendments C-234. Does anyone feel threatened by this? Will the fact that the elected representative of Canadians express once again their wish to see this adopted be an impediment on the Senate doing its job? I don't think so. Anyone here could argue that. I don't think anyone here could argue that. And if the facts that were presented to you, Madam Speaker, would be covered by privilege, no evidence was presented that the work of a senator or the Senate was impeded. In fact, none of the senators who spoke on Tuesday made reference to the fact that a senator was or is unable to perform their functions. This is the essence of privilege. From the decisions of your predecessors, Madam Speaker, it is clear that the facts presented to you by Senator St. Germain do not constitute a breach of privilege. If there were a breach to the decorum or the use of sharp language, it should have been raised as a point of order. That was the appropriate remedy. And when a senator is threatened, they should never hesitate to report the threat to our security service and to the police. Senator Clement did that, and I commend her for that. Madam Speaker, I think it's important, and I just have a few minutes left, I think it's important for you in taking your decision to look at how this place functions, not just one evening, but on a regular basis. You all know I have been here for quite a while. And not that I think this should be a competition on who gets more maligned in the chamber or in the media, but I think it's important to share some of my experience since I've been a senator. Some senators sent letters to the leader of the Conservative Party some time ago, asking him to do what they thought I should do. I already talked about Senator Lankin's letter, as it was the subject of a question of privilege I raised when she wrote that letter to our leader. On October 15, 2020, Senator Delphon wrote a letter to Aaron O'Toole and copied some other Conservative MPs, asking them to pressure me to end Senate obstruction on private bills. Isn't it somewhat ironic, colleagues, to see that same Senator Delphon participating in the delaying of Bill C-234? I have stopped counting the number of ministers, parliamentary secretaries, MPs, and senators who have gone on social media to tell me what I should or should not do, or to invite followers to contact me. I will give you just two examples. First, Liberal Parliamentary Secretary Mark Ariston tweeted this in May. I am calling on Senator Don Plett to stop stalling and get tough on crime by passing C-21. He had every right to send this tweet, although the fact that he was accusing me of stalling a bill that we did not yet have in this chamber at the time made him look a little ridiculous. Senator Klein has gone on Twitter several times to ask me to speed up passage of Bill C-241. I took no exception to this. He was doing his job. I'm fine with that. I don't think any senator receives more personal shots in this chamber than I do, and I'm okay with that. I cannot remember a speech from Senator Wu or Senator Delphon that did not contain a swipe at either me or at our caucus. Are these two ultra-partisan senators bullies towards me, my colleagues, and our staff? Probably, but they are who they are. May I remind you, Madam Speaker, that Senator McFedrin insulted me in her maiden speech. She had been here only a few days and said something that she was forced to retract. A few years ago, there was a protest right here in front of the Senate building, people calling me names, carrying signs, my picture on it. I could not get through the main door. I had to be escorted to the back door. These protesters were here at the behest of other senators. I don't recall anyone here calling them out on this. I didn't. Just a couple of weeks ago, A group of pro-Palestinian protesters surrounded my car, jumped on my car, beat on the roof of my car, tried to prevent me from driving. It was reported in the media, part of a daily routine of a senator. After a committee meeting in 2014, I received in one night 1,300 emails in one night. The legal committee was studying the prostitution bill. And let me tell you, none of those emails were kind to me. There were threats, there were doctored pictures of me. I have been involved in a lot of very controversial pieces of legislation over the years. I received tons of messages on dolphins, on conversion therapy, on transgender rights, on prostitution, on the wheat board, on UNDRIP, on elephants, amongst others. Not all fan mail, I assure you. Again, I don't want to diminish in any way what happened on November 9, Senators. What I am saying is that violence in public discourse is sadly neither new nor specific to the Senate or some senators. It can be a cancer on our democratic life, and for sure something must be done about it. But there is no simple solution to this. And crucifying one senator over one incident will not change anything about it. The parliamentary privilege is not the tool to change the behavior of parliamentarians and ordinary citizens. Now, Madam Speaker, I will just take a few minutes to reflect personally on what I did Tuesday, November 9th. And I have reflected on this for some time, and again, Madam Speaker, thank you for giving us the extra days. I have sought wisdom and advice in hopes of better understanding the situation before us. What I did Thursday, November 9th, did not constitute a question of privilege. But, Madam Speaker, I conducted myself in a way that I cannot hold myself to. I hold myself in higher regard than how I conducted myself that day. I never intended to cause harm or discomfort. I acknowledge that I lost my cool. I spoke too loudly. Many would say yelled. My wife, when her and I speak at the dinner table, many times says, "Don't yell at me." I have a hearing impediment which creates me, first of all, to talk loudly at the best of times. Then when I raise my voice, that is yelling. And I did get much too loud. My intention were never to be mean-spirited. And I recognize that I didn't conduct myself in the manner that I would like. I have on occasion quoted scripture, and I will quote just one short verse. The Apostle Paul at Ephesians says, "Be angry, but sin not." I was angry and I sinned. I was angry and I lost my temper. The being angry is not wrong. I believe I had the right to be angry because I believe we were treated wrong, but I did not have the right to conduct myself the way I did with that anger. I tell myself countless times, count to 10, before you do anything. I asked my deputy leader today, when things get heated and I get up, put your hand on my arm, which might cause me to just think before I speak. Unfortunately, our deputy leader has gone through some difficult times, and she wasn't here beside me when this happened, so I'm not blaming her. I would like to. Not her fault, it's mine. There were real emotions here. I came across to you, Madam Speaker. I was much too vocal with you. I didn't respect your position the way I should have. And I apologize to you for that, unreservedly. I stood in front of Senator St. Germain and Senator Clement, and I was loud, much too loud. And I apologize to both of them for that, sincerely and humbly. It was wrong of me. I quite frankly didn't think that Senator Monsignor and I had gotten into a mean-spirited exchange, but it was said in one of the comments that I had, so if that was the case, Senator Monsignor, thank you. So, colleagues, I promise that I will try to do better. Will I succeed? I hope you forgive me if I don't. But I will try. What I did was wrong. It was unprofessional. It was unbecoming. Mostly, it was unbecoming. Colleagues, I thank you for your time. I thank you for hopefully your understanding. Madam Speaker, you will in due course come back with your ruling. As I said, I do not believe that there is a question of privilege, but Madam Speaker, I want you to know that I want to support you going forward. I want to support this chamber going forward, and I will respect your decision. Thank you very much, colleagues.